Give myself a little audio check. Give myself a little audio check. And we're good. Boom! There we go. Welcome, Dylan, to Party Time.
Hi
Uh,
guys.
Party Time Barbarians. For the guys gone bald now. I gotta tell you, I think I missed my calling in life. I believe naming shows and episodes was my true calling. Just just puns aplenty on everything we're doing. Uh,
I think Tina even said that Guys Gone Wild Man was incredible. It was,
yeah.
it was so good.
Oh man, and then we got the LGB Taldore. They're going pretty strong. That's our other every other week stream.
Oh, right on.
And that's been fun. That's all LGBT cast on there, and that's fun with Pride Month going on. And yeah, but yeah, let's get into it. Let's have some fun. We are talking about the concept of an entire D&D party of a particular thing. In this case, barbarians. So whether it's gonna work, what kind of struggles it'll have, um, if a particular build I thought of is the absolute best one and everybody should play it, all that kind of all that kind of thing. I do have one. I have a couple in mind that I want to bring up over the course of the thing. Bringing Dylan here on because you have played a barbarian in one of my games, and you also run your own games. And
Yes.
um,
Gargoth, the Barbarian.
Gargoth. Pictured, miniature wise, pictured directly over my head, at least until you got your own special ordered miniature in.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots
Thanks,
of.
Hero Forge, for sponsoring this video.
Oh man, I can imagine. They're not, by the way, if anybody is watching. Um, happy to take a sponsorship at any point, especially for things that are really cool, like Hero Forge, like the 1985 games terrain, which is featured in that picture right there, has been coming in really handy.
They are actually, crazy enough, a Portland company.
Ooh.
And crazy enough, they are like a block from my house.
Oh, so you should just go knock on the door and be like,
I
"Hey."
Have you seen our videos? They're
Right?
pretty good.
No, I think I'm the first person I've seen who will take their flat terrain and put it in like picture frames for easy, like, so I can have two or three scenarios from some cheap picture frames from the craft store that I just had like lying around when they were on sale one day. So I just pop the glass out, put the pieces in where I want them, use like a little tacky to hold it down where it needs to be, pop the top on, and then now that I've got a glass top on it, I can do my dry erase or whatever I want on the top. Stick things over that, so if I want to like have a tree that's hiding something, and then that happens, I can like pull the tree off, and then the thing is underneath it, and I don't have to worry about it too much, and I can pull the whole board off and put it in my shelf, and then just pull it up when I need it.
That's such a good idea.
Yeah.
That's such a good idea.
It works. It only works because of the flat terrain. Like I can't do it with any of my other terrain pieces. So
Mhm.
we've stumbled into a whole like I don't even or dungeon craft I think is what it's called. But we've stumbled into like what's essentially an ad for dungeon craft, and we're not sponsored or anything. Well, back on the topic. We'll kind of break it into like the pillars of play. So like combat, exploration, and role play or story or narrative or however you label that last bit. But we'll start with combat. So the idea of a full like 4 or 5 member party of barbarians, how combat would go. Um,
I feel like anything within melee range would just be utterly vaporized.
yeah,
Damn near instantly.
I have a similar. That's fairly obvious, I think, to anybody that's ever played with a barbarian. If there were four of those animals
God.
just destroying something, I picture anything on the ground that they can just swarm on is just toast. Like, there's no discussion about it. There's no need to even discuss tactics. It's like you got 4 or 5 barbarians. You point them at it. It's gonna die.
Oh, absolutely. Raging and they're taking
Yeah.
less damage.
Sure.
I know fighters may be considered the damage kings, but as far as like versatility in melee, I like barbarians a lot just because they do take
I think
a lot
there's
less damage.
pluses to barbarians, which is the fact that like another aspect of combat is being able to tank hits that you're taking. And oh geez,
Yeah.
if you got a bunch of barbarians. Now one thing I thought of as one of the builds that came up to me was because you can have a barbarian that's all about just dealing damage, just straight up hacking. The berserker. Travis Willingham played the berserker barbarian in Critical Role season 1. Just all about just smashing, and they're good at it. But what came to my mind was the other roles of combat, so like the true tank of the party. Then what came to my mind was a stout halfling. So they're getting a bonus to dexterity and constitution, the two main defense stats for the barbarian. They can use like a shield, and then a one-handed weapon. And what came to my mind was an ancestral guardian with like a whip, weirdly enough. So they're not doing that much damage themselves, but while they're raging, because all the other barbarians don't have infinite rages every day, and it's hard to get them back. So the idea of a ancestral guardian halfling, it's just kind of a funny thought to me of this halfling that's really mad and its ancestors have its back in combat. But every time it lands a hit, those spirits give disadvantage to attacks on everyone else, and everyone else gets damage resistance. And even while the other barbarians are raging, giving it the thing they're attacking disadvantage on everyone lets everybody use their reckless attack, and its attacks are still just straight attacks. And yeah, so having one of those guys charging in and like just whipping something like that wizard in that Rick and Morty episode,
Whip wizard.
the whipping wizard. You dragon slut. And he's just like smacking it. So it like can't attack anybody else effectively. Not that it was gonna do, and like any damage it's doing is getting halved in. So I see that as really useful for when people are getting low on rages. They have like a reaction ability to reduce damage by 2d6, and I just picture like a big hit coming at a different barbarian, and that guy being like, well, I fling my halfling grandfather's spirit in front of it, and he just like takes it, and reducing the damage by like 10, but then they're raging, so it's effectively reducing it even more, and yeah, I could see that dude taking everything down.
Gosh. Yeah, that's a combination that I had never thought of. And the bonus to con and dex are nice too, because after playing Gargoth, who I think I told you I wanted to model him directly after like just Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah.
Just like
just literally Conan.
Shirtless, yeah, just literally Conan. They are stat hungry. Like especially if you want to be defensive, like you need good strength, you need good con, you want to pump that dex up, and then of course if you're using like standard array, you very likely have weak stats in probably like charisma, wisdom, intelligence.
All your soft stats kind of take a hit because you have to prioritize your other ones.
Exactly. Yeah.
Another thing I'd thought of, because there is that issue of what if there is a dragon that can just fly, and like four players all just hucking a javelin. It gives that dragon a lot of flybys on damage that they can't necessarily all resist. Like it's not necessarily four totem bear barbarians who can resist the fire damage as it flies by. So having an option to hit it at range seems really useful, which for me brought to mind things like the High Elf, because they get a free wizard cantrip. So
do they?
Yeah, so that's a racial feature. They still want their intelligence high because the attack or the save is based off their intelligence.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's. But it's sort of I can't get in melee, so I need this thing I can do. And another thought I had was the Magic Initiate feat lets you pick a spell, like one first level spell you can do once a day. And the main thing was Catapult came to mind, which is you pick an object within 60 feet, it then flies 90 feet, hits, does some damage, and then and that's kind of it. But
immediately and falls.
Yeah, but the thing I was thinking was if you get like a harpoon with like a rope attached to it, using that spell Catapult to fling it 90 feet. So you're going to do like 3d10 damage or whatever it is. And arguably, if you can make the point with your DM, if your DM's cool with it, arguably also the piercing damage or make it all piercing damage or whatever. But this would be something you need to check with your DM before session 0 on and have them be cool with it. But I think it'd be funny to once a day just like fling a harpoon into a griffin or whatever that's flying by, and then everybody can just grab the rope and yank the thing down.
Absolutely. And that's never something I had always thought about, like kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Quirky characters like that with very kind of like, ooh, we've got this one trick and we do it well.
Right.
And not necessarily a one trick, but something that's completely unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
Is not being, well, what I'm trying to say is that a lot of characters are like that in the D&D books. Like, I'm playing a module game, and a lot of the characters have like very unique tricks like that they introduce. That's something I never would have thought of. Makes perfect sense, and I could totally see it being in a module.
Yeah. My interest got piqued on Catapult when I was writing up a wizard, and the idea of like, what's the most like busted thing a wizard can do with like a first level slot? And I was like, well, what if you spent like 1,000 gold pieces on vials of alchemist fire, and then like just netted them together and just used Catapult to just like throw the 20 some odd alchemist fires all into the same target. And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be kind of amazing, doing like the 3d10 or 3d8, whatever it is, bludgeoning damage, and then on top of that the like 20d6 fire damage off the first level spell slot.
Yeah. Oh, I know you're writing a wizard for my campaign, so that's what I think of. Like, oh my god, I gotta
and it's
rebalance so much stuff.
I mean,
you guys fight at Tarask at level 3.
It's 1,000 gold per casting, but man, it'd be nice. So yeah, that's a funny thought that I've had for like a ranged option. Other than that, there's not a lot. I think one of the Path of the Totem Barbarian features might allow for sort of a pseudo flying, like a running through the air kind of thing. I think there's a later Totem Barbarian ability to do that. Otherwise, you're going to want at least one or two of your characters to have some sort of racial ability to fly or something, because a flyby is going to be a real problem for it. And it could be that your party's not good at a flyby, and they're stuck pulling out longbows and using their secondary stat to try to do something. But I mean, it's not insurmountable, but it is probably their biggest issue. The other thing I thought of was there's not a lot of area effect abilities in the barbarians. I think there's like a desert or storm herald. I think there's one ability that does a couple of points of damage in like a 10-foot radius around them.
It's really minuscule though.
Yeah,
and you're
it's
right.
not a lot.
Like, it's very much single target damage. I remember with Gargoth, when I was like, we were like level 2 kind of, and I was fighting kobolds and hitting them for like 26 damage, which is insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's not a whole lot of, so you can kill something really quickly, one thing really quickly, and I guess it could be argued that if you've got 5 barbarians, oh my god, they'd be able to vaporize stuff. But
but still, if you're looking at like
group damage,
if you're looking at like 50 goblins or something, where that might be a normal kind of encounter, not a normal encounter. 50 of anything is going to be rough. But if you've only got 5 barbarians and they can only get to 1 each per turn, that's going to take them like 10 rounds to kill all of them. That's a lot of attacks coming in. So the possibility of getting overwhelmed by a huge swarm of enemies and not having a great option for area effect. But still, they're a big old sack of hit points that's also raging. The big swarm of enemies like that is probably doing regular old piercing damage, and so they're getting to have it on all the raging and all that. And you can always huck javelins at things. I know one build that's funny is a barbarian that's like dual wielding daggers. It's usually for somebody that wants to multi-class into rogue, but it's the idea of being able to recklessly attack to chuck daggers with advantage, and then when they hit, they are finesse weapons, but you're using your strength modifier, and so you get your rage stuff and you get your sneak attack damage as they hit, because you're getting advantage off the reckless attack, and you always get sneak attack damage if you have advantage. So that's kind of funny to me, is like, but that's a multi-class thing. We're talking about a straight party of just barbarians, but that is also a funny thing. I think Taliesin Jaffe did it for a one shot, where he was called the Owlbear, I think, and he was basically Batman. He was just Batman. But so yeah, defense tank. So there issues at range, issues with area of effect, but as much damage they put out and as effective of destroyers of things they are, it's I think they might be able to overcome it. Um, but DMs are going to want to give them a little bit of a challenge with more than just the one enemy. Although giving the party of barbarians just a big old like sack of this thing is going to eat the town unless you kill it, and be like, just make sure you put it closer to the town than you expected because they will be able to shoot right through the thing. Um,
Oh yeah. Or
yeah.
oh man, what would pose a challenge for me is I mean, I don't know if you were going to get to this later in the episode,
Mm,
but things specifically with a lot of control to him. Because,
mm.
like, man, as strong as Gargoth was, boy, was he dumb. And
Yeah,
just not charismatic and not intelligent and
he got
wise.
hit with that hold person one time, and he was just sitting there taking like three attacks from three enemies around for like I think almost a full minute. Like he just never made the save.
It
Uh,
it had to I don't think the guy lost concentration. I think the spell just like expired. Like after the full minute, then Gargoth could move again.
right,
Thank God I didn't get hit with that 2 times in a row.
right.
But ooh, yeah, anything to control the group and maybe like separate them, I
Hmm.
think would pose a challenge for barbarians.
Right. And so you
Um,
might want to have one of your barbarians, maybe somebody who took Wood Elf or Eladrin. So Wood Elves get like a speed boost, so you have a little better mobility. And then Eladrin, or Eladrin, or however you would want to say it, they're sort of the Fey blooded elves. They get a bonus action Misty Step, basically, once per short rest.
oh, right
So
on.
that gives them a little extra mobility. But so if you have that character who takes Mage Slayer as a feat, and so like their job is, uh, getting up to and stopping the spellcaster because they know that an upcast of hold person is going to lock down two or three of the party, which would swing it pretty hard. So having that mobility option barbarian to go after the mage is going to be probably a necessity. You probably just really need somebody to take that role. Otherwise, yeah, a one or two little goblin spellcasters are going to leave the whole party pretty pretty subject to destruction from the rest of the horde. Um, but yeah, that's a very fair point. Uh, oh, another combat thing is healing. Now I don't think it's that big of an issue with a party of barbarians, especially if somebody takes like if somebody just happened to have a little higher charisma score, just like a 12 or a 14 or something. Um, Taking the inspiring leader feat to give everybody it's like level plus charisma modifier temporary hit points whenever you take like 10 minutes to give everybody an inspiring speech. It might be like once a day or something. But if you can give everybody an extra 10 hit points, mid level, that's effectively an extra 20 hit points for a whole party, with the raging and everything, since they're going to take half damage in most situations. So
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
yeah. But also just is somebody eventually will get knocked to 0 hit points as tough as they are. So you need some kind of healing option, and there's nothing in the class itself. But I have a couple of figures off to the in the corner there of the Asimar barbarian, which I know Ashley Johnson plays in the current season of Critical Role. And they have effectively a lay on hands ability. It's only once a day for just a boom of healing, but having when you'll finish your combat probably immediately after, but somebody might get knocked to 0, and you need something to like stabilize them and bring them back up. Um, I'm sure there's a background that can give you like the medicine kit like tool proficiency or some way of doing that and making sure you have medicine kits on hand.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
healer feat. I think it stabilizes them at 0, or maybe it gives them 1 hit point.
yeah. I think
I always
I
thought that it would be like the barbarians would mob around the person and someone would shove a healing potion down their throat.
yeah, healing potions would be definitely probably the way to go on that. Probably a little more practical than anything else. But if somebody wants to play an Asmar Barbarian, that has some cool features too, and one of those features being for free once a day, being like, oh, he took too much, and like run over and give him like the back of the hand and be like, wake up, whack. Uh, Light of my angel ancestor upon you. Now get up. Yeah. Well, that's a lot of combat. Let's talk about some exploration stuff. Again, nothing really in the class itself about exploration too much, except for I think Ancestral Guardians has a thing where they can do augury and some of those other spells where you can get like advice from an extraplanar entity. So that can be really helpful for getting exploring around, investigating things. Um,
The only real things that I can think of, and specifically with Path of the Totem that I was when we kind of like doubled up on that Path of the Elk feat and
oh
Path of
yeah,
the Bear, and then later fixed it. So it's like, oh, Gargot suddenly knows the winds and he's able to fly their ship better.
right.
That would help with traversing and traveling.
Yeah.
Um,
Totem. I think other totem stuff has like I think there's an Eye of the Eagle kind of ability where you can see for like a mile and like make out certain amount of detail up to that really crazy range.
yeah,
Um,
and you had pointed it out to me, something that I didn't notice before, that it's like the first feat is very combat,
yeah,
but the second feat with all of them is very utility.
yeah.
Which I would think. So I would say that probably a bunch of the totems have that
That might be
available.
true. Yeah, I haven't looked at them too specifically because usually when I go barbarian, it's for like a splash, to like augment other kind of combat stuff. Uh,
Oh,
or I'm like, oh yeah, zealot's really cool, because of their level 3 stuff, and then you kind of just forget to look at the other stuff. Um, so yeah, that could be pretty universally true across the board with all the classes, getting some kind of role play or exploration feature. I know another thought that I had was again with Magic Initiate or with Ritual Caster, if you have any barbarians in the party with intelligence of like 13 or better, uh, which you probably want somebody that's like a barbarian that's criminal background, so they have stealth and they have thieves tools proficiency. It can be the barbarian that can disarm a trap or unlock a door. Some doors are difficult to smash, especially quietly. Um, if it's a wood door, it's just like, well, we're party barbarians. We're gonna kick it in. Like,
I made this door out of glass and chip bags. You'll never be able to get through here.
right. But I picture one of the barbarians being the criminal background, sort of serving as the rogue, and then one of the things I thought of was a ritual caster, where you get essentially a ritual spell book, that you have two spells in it, and then you can add spells to it just like a wizard. Um, but Find Familiar is often extremely useful for exploring. You got this big party of brutish destruction masters, but you can have one of the characters who can create a little raven who can then fly around and scout things out for you. That same person could pick up Identify for when you find obviously magical things, and then use the Identify spell as a ritual. None of this would be super useful mid combat necessarily, but for exploring around and figuring out magic stuff, that's usually all I ever even want from like a wizard or a cleric for that exploration phase, is scouting things out safely and knowing what the magic items are. But that's me. I run a
I
lot
would
of magic
agree.
items.
I would agree. Yeah, yeah. I yeah, I guess when I think of fantasy worlds, I think of something where it's like, ooh, magic is very high magic. It's very mysterious, but
Mm-hmm.
kind of looking through some of the modules, like we had never done it. I had only ever played D&D with you,
Right.
and all your stuff was homebrew, but there's so much stuff that's like commonplace, like so much weird magical knowledge that just like people know about.
Right.
Like, oh, you want to cast this spell, you need an eye stock of a beholder, and that's something that normally I wouldn't suspect that a barbarian would know about, but maybe that's just my misconception with barbarians as a whole.
the thing
Um,
the thing
I
I've
would totally love like a super smart barbarian
Yeah,
that
I think
knew some spells.
that's the thing I've liked about Adams, who was recently multiclassed into barbarian, because he had an intelligence of 6, and then we put a headband of intellect on him, and his intelligence bumped up to 19, and suddenly he was aware of like all the injustice in the world that was happening around him, and it pissed him off, and then he went into barbarian. He's just really mad because now he understands there's all this crap happening. Like before, it was like, yeah, he's like, oh, that person asked me what my problem was and then walked away, and I was like, why did he ask that? Oh well, moving on with my day. And now it's just like, oh no, that guy was being a dick. And so now he's suddenly very angry. So I picture that sometimes with that especially like the mom rage, sometimes it's sometimes called, where or parent rage, where you're not yelling at someone, but you're speaking very intently about the thing they should be doing. And so I picture that attitude on, on like a otherwise very serene like I don't know, hobgoblin or something, who's just like looking at somebody and is just like, the thing you're going to do now is I'm going to take this axe and put it in your face. It's nothing personal, but it has to happen now. And he's like, whack! And sort of that calm focus could be another interpretation. One of the players plays the character Mulligan in the LGB Taldore game. They do their rages like that, where it's got sort of a southern twang kind of character, and just is like very ultra focus, not like angry Hulk out, but just like a battle focus essentially.
That is something that I never would have thought about, and like kind of goes back to my notions of what a barbarian is. But yeah, Adam played that so well. And everyone kind of knew where he was going with that, and like when he did, I'm going to rage, everyone freaked out.
Yeah, it was so good.
That was so good. That was so good.
Yeah, it was pretty great. Yeah, that's nothing but compliments on that whole arc, which will continue. I don't know if I don't think he thinks about his stuff too mechanically, so I think he might just be going barbarian for a while until the headband gets knocked off or something. But oh boy, he wants to pick up that extra attack at some point, because he multi-classed at 5th level, so he didn't get the extra attack from fighter. So he might be most of the game through before he's picking that up.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe this is like a 1-level dip or something.
Yeah, could be. Also, for exploration stuff in the guide to Wildmount, while we're talking about Wildmount stuff, the Pallid Elf is a new elf subrace in there, and it's very much like Drow in that they get a selection of spells as they level up. Like at 1st level they have a cantrip, at 3rd level they get a 1st level spell they can do once a day, and then at like 5th level they get a 2nd level spell they can do once a day. That's
crazy.
With Drow in the core book, it's like dancing lights and something else, and the darkness spell.
And, yeah.
Fairy Fire is the other one. But for Pallid Elves, it's the light cantrip, sleep, and then invisibility at 5th level. So that's something that when I saw, I was like, oh, that could be amazing in about anything. So again, thinking back to the idea of like a criminal background or an urchin background, a barbarian hitting 5th level, and now having access to cast invisibility once a day, which lasts an hour. So they have that option to, like, we need a stealthy person to go scout something out. Be like, well, you have this person who can just go invisible for an hour. And if they get caught, they just rage out and start swinging.
As one does.
Yeah, as one does. Yeah. So mad they caught me! Yeah, so that's something I think of. But mostly because I read through Pallid Elf, and I just want to play a Pallid Elf at some point. I don't care what class I'm going to stick them in. Because they've got just a sweet background with everything going on there. I just had a momentary panic in my heart as I went like, wait, did I check the audio? And I like looked it down and I was like, oh no, we're good.
Oh my God.
I did that once with oh geez.
It was like our 2nd session.
Yeah. So a lot of fun exploration options in there. And I think something that which I guess goes back to the whole concept of this series, is the idea of having a whole party that's one class really lets people go in and explore different builds of that class that you wouldn't usually go into. Like, if you're the only barbarian in a party, people kind of expect you to be, the dude with a big old axe who's going to be smashing things to get that damage in. But the idea of being the sneaky barbarian or the smart barbarian or the Beastmaster Barbarian who gets like takes a bunch of feats to get spell access to like have a familiar hawk and whatever else they have going on. Yeah, I think it could be a fun thing to do to have that all blank campaign.
Absolutely. And I think I told you when I wanted to make Gargoth initially, people were like, "Oh, you want to make a Goliath and you want to get the Charger feat?" Like there was a whole meta system that people had come up with, and it's
Right.
like, "No, I just want to do Conan."
Yeah, I just want to play
But just
Conan.
to have 5 people doing Barbarians and be like, "Oh, shoot,
Yeah,
this identity, this preconceived identity that
yeah,
I had come up with, now I have some flexibility with it."
right.
So
Yeah,
yeah, you could be like I don't know,
I'm
an
the
old
halfling with the
tribe
whip
chef.
barbarian.
Yeah, exactly. God, who knows? You could be the Kalishtar barbarian
Mm.
if you wanted to do some Eberron stuff and do Totem, and I think they've got psychic resistance. So it's like, boom, when I
Oh,
rage, I'm resistant to everything.
everything
I
resistance.
have
Yeah,
no weakness. Um,
yeah, that can be
yeah, and
solid.
just to get crazy with it, like, oh, such possibility.
Right. And you'd need to, for certain builds anyways, you'd really have to talk to the rest of the party about what gap you're filling in order to make sure that the party's kind of balanced, which honestly probably most parties should do more often anyways, where people
Yeah,
really
for
sit down
sure.
and have that session zero of like talking out what they want to be doing. But here, if you have like 4 people who all show up with humans with the Sentinel feat, essentially nobody has the Sentinel feat because one of Sentinel's major features is the idea that you don't get to make this extra opportunity attack if someone else with Sentinel is also in that area. So if more than one person has it, it can get like if you have a big wide party, you can have 2 people with Sentinel go to different ends of the battlefield and still get full use out of it. But if they end up like next to each other on the same thing, they effectively don't have it,
Yeah.
and that'll be a big old waste of a feature for you. At least it'll feel that way.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of overlap there.
Right.
Definitely something that you need to talk about.
Yeah.
This whole idea just makes me think of like 5 Beastmaster Rangers, like one poor guy getting mauled by 5 bears. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Which
unlucky guy.
which I guess we'll cover when we get to Ranger.
Oh, for sure.
But and I'm kind of excited about Ranger. I think is actually very good. Same with Warlock. When you have 4 or 5 Warlocks, can be an extremely diverse party, because there's so much flexibility in the features. Um,
Absolutely. I found out
yeah.
that there's like an equivalent of a divine soul sorcerer, but for warlocks. So
Yeah,
like
that's
warlock
probably
that
my
has healing
favorite.
potential, and it's
Yeah.
like I didn't even know that existed.
It's your patron is an angel or a powerful unicorn or something. It has one of the I think it's the best. I personally, this is personal opinion. And it's correct, so shut up.
You heard it here, folks.
You hit it here first. Your opinions are wrong, and mine is correct. The Celestial Pact Warlock, I think, is the best healer in the game, because they have that feature. I think in the game, like I would put it over
Wow.
the Life Cleric as far as in utility, because they're a full Warlock with Eldritch Blast and infiltration abilities and Pact of the Chain for a super familiar or smiting abilities with a Pact of the Blade. They're everything. Plus, they have like their level +2 uses of a D6 healing at a 60-foot range as a bonus action. So it's not that it's more hit points of healing, but when you really need healing is when somebody gets knocked to 0 and they need to get back up, and you need to get them up with a bonus action. So aside from like mass heal or revivify options for like straight in battle healing, I would pick a Celestial Warlock every time because they're still a fully functioning Warlock, and then on top of that, they're just like, oh, boop, you're up, and then also get the like Eldritch Blast 3 attacks out.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I
That's
like that a lot.
insane.
But
Yeah.
we have diverged heavy into the Warlock, which I probably should have started with because it's the one of these that I'm most excited about because there's so much Warlock stuff. Um, but I have a sneaky suspicion the genie path that's on Unearthed Arcana right now. I have a feeling that's about to get printed into something. It's on playtest material right now through Wizards, but it's pretty well balanced. It's heavily flavorful. It maybe needs a tweak. Maybe it's pretty good as is. It's not overpowered. It's just a heavy chunk of flavor. So I have a suspicion they're going to have a source book that goes to a plane of existence where genies are going on, and then they're going to be like, hey, the path of the genie warlock right in here. It's pretty polished already, so I suspect we're going to see that pretty soon.
That's the Noble Soul one, I think it's called.
Me?
I can't remember.
Or there was...
I haven't read too much into it, but
well,
it sounds...
another reason I think it's going to come up is because it is the second iteration of it, because there was the Noble Soul and then there's a new one. So there's they polished it and put it back out, and I'm like, that's probably going to come out then, because it was already pretty cool. Then they polished it and put it out again, and now it's extra flavorful and extra cool, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, this is probably coming out.
That's crazy.
But yeah,
that's gonna be good.
We'll talk about that more when we get to Warlocks. And we've kind of peppered in story stuff for the Barbarians, the other pillar of play. But I do picture that sort of like the sage background, like high elf or a human where their feat was magic initiate or something like that. Like that barbarian, I picture them being around. I could see a human that came from like a wizard tower, but when it came to well, I guess we're getting into background story stuff. So like human sage background or acolyte background, whatever it is, with magic initiate as their feat at first level, gets to their like initiation into the tower, and like something happens, like some antagonistic thing happens with like a mentor or something, and he just like punches him out, and just like he's like this high intellect tower, and or maybe they're a young kid who it's essentially like a boarding school to get into wizardry, and they just kept punching people out and punched people out too many times, and then they kicked him out, and he picked up a broadsword and went, all right, well. I know what I think. Like, I know about magic. It's more satisfying to just hit something.
For sure. Yeah, I feel like there would be many great filters between the barbarian and then a high intelligence wizard tower. Like, I don't think the barbarian would get quite there. Punching kids out in an orphanage, that sounds more barbarian speed.
Right.
But what do I know? I get small barbarian brain.
Yep. So we're talking the big barbarian brain barbarian. So that they would serve that purpose really well. There's also that like criminal background. I kind of picture that as the Pallid Elf. Maybe it's the urchin instead of the criminal background, where they came in from the Pallid place, whatever it's. I always forget the name of it because it's
Pallid Grove.
Pallid Grove. I always forget it because it's so obvious. They came out of the Pallid Grove maybe as a very small child and got picked up by a caravan or something and dropped off in the city, lived in the streets. So they've got that urchin background. They know how to use some thieves' tools. They got some stealth proficiency. They maybe you swap out sleight of hand for investigation, which I think is something you're technically allowed to do, but talk to your DM as far as background stuff. And then they pop into that barbarian, and they're your sort of pseudo rogue in the party who's able to sneak around, get into places they otherwise wouldn't be able to, and scout for the party. That's a pretty solid character right there. That's two barbarians though, where they need int as a stat that at least doesn't suck. So it's probably, if you're doing point array, that's probably like your 12 is going into int on both of those guys. Hopefully, maybe the human character, or you don't. No, there's no stat prerequisite on the whatever the get a spell feat. There is on the ritual caster feat. So that's one that can be tricky to get. But other than that, you need some smashers. I'm always a fan of the lizard folk barbarian. Especially if you're going to go like Path of the Zealot or something that does extra damage but isn't the berserker, because the berserker uses up the bonus action a lot, and the lizard folk gets like a bite attack as their bonus action. I forget if it's a number of times a day or something, but
oh wow,
yeah, they get that bite attack that restores hit points, and if anytime you're restoring some hit points and raging, you're getting double effect out of those hit points. So that lizard folk barbarian can be real tough to take down. And then the halfling barbarian, because I love a halfling barbarian. that ancestral guardian with like the shield and the whip, and is like landing attacks just so they don't get so they have the enemy would have disadvantage on everything and give everybody resistance even if they're not raging.
Now explain to me why the whip. Like why a whip?
Because they're not doing that much damage anyways, because they're heavily investing into their dexterity and constitution to be as defensive as possible. So they just need to land a hit, and because the halfling has a little lower speed, I like the idea of it having a reach weapon that can still use their strength modifier, or it can use their dexterity modifier, because you don't have to use your strength modifier when you're raging, I don't think. So since their dex might be a point higher in modifier than their strength, they'll maybe land a hit a little easier, but they'll still be raging. They'll still land that hit. If they use their strength, they'll get the extra damage. But they just need to hit it to get that Ancestral Guardian thing going. So a little reach just sounds good to me on those guys. They're probably 9 times out of 10 technically better off pulling a short sword instead of pulling the whip. Or a long sword. They can still use a long sword.
Hey man, some like little gnome going crazy and then whipping a bunch of people around. It just sounds so good.
Yeah, I love when we get to fighters, I love the character I call the Whip Wizard, who whips people but uses Battle Master tactics, but he has like a big spell tome on his side, and he just uses deception. He's like a charlatan background or something, and he's just like acting like he's casting spells. He's like, Omdele push, and he like just whips somebody while holding the spell book, and it pushes him back like 10 feet, and people are like, oh, he's casting spells, and he's like, ha 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 ha, trip, disarm, and just calling out his attacks, but he's like disarming, pushing people around the battlefield with a whip. I love the Whip Wizard. I still gotta play the Whip Wizard.
That's amazing. But the whip's not invisible. Like people can see the whip, right?
Oh yeah, they can see the whip. It's just that he's also holding a spellbook. It's just he's making a deception check every turn, and he's actually a wizard, and the whip is like his spellcasting focus or something.
Oh, I got you. I was like, why? Okay, but they can see the whip. Like he could have anything in his hand. He could just have a puppet. Yeah. Like,
but I just love a fighter with like charlatan background where they can have another identity that they have like paperwork for, and it's the idea of this guy walking around saying he's a wizard. And has paperwork saying, like, I went to school at the School of Wizardry. I am the Whip Wizard. Or whatever you make his name. But he will be the Whip Wizard. I don't know. That's just a really funny character I've thought of several times. Back on Barbarians, that's a pretty full party. You could bring in other stuff. I always love a Goblin Barbarian. I know our buddy Joe had a Goblin Barbarian named Nurpus, I want to say. I believe it was Nurpus. And Nurpus's whole thing was he had taken a blow to the head with like a time spell or something. So he had a different frame of reference temporally with people's stuff. And so his perspective was when he'd see somebody who had something he wanted, it was that they had his stuff. Because from his perspective, he's thinking of the future where it is his stuff after he kills them and takes it. And then it's his stuff, but they are holding it, and so that's an injustice, and he has to like run up and attack them. And so it's like a way to do like a chaotic evil like goblin barbarian that's still somewhat morally justified. It's like, they have my stuff, and like he's like, ah, and like runs up to attack them, and it's like, no man, you just haven't stolen it yet, but you have this like your sense of your concept of time is all mixed up.
That's hilarious.
It was pretty great.
Oh, Joe makes up the best characters.
Yeah, he gets some gems pretty often. I know their whole thing was like kneecapping people, and the only thing they were scared of was children, because they didn't make sense. Because again, he's seeing the future where they're people, but right now they're small, and like this doesn't make sense. This whole thing doesn't. It screws up his whole temporal analysis of what's happening. But yeah, the small barbarian, you know, the difference between a D10 and a D12 is on average a point of damage. You're talking a point, maybe 2 point, maybe 3 points late game. So having a halfling two-handing a longsword is effectively the same thing as, you know, a human wielding a great axe. So don't be afraid to be like, oh man, they're small, they're smaller weapons. Be like, it's fine, it'll be fine. Plus, there's usually cooler weapons at longsword than there are at great axe, just because it's a more common weapon. You would expect to see it more often. So when you run across some cool magic weapon, it tends to be the kind of weapon people use.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like more characters and classes can use longswords than they can great swords. So
Yeah.
because of that, there are cooler longswords with cooler varieties out there.
Yep. That is a fact. But yeah, I think we have covered a lot of, if not all, the angles on this kind of thing. Yeah. I do like the idea of a, because you still need like a talker, somebody who's like the face of the party, which there's nothing automatic about Barbarian that leans into that. But I do like the idea of, like, say that healer Barbarian going with the Aasimar, or Aasimar, or I'm not sure how people say it. In any case, the blue people with the gold beard. I've always liked the idea that in a campaign where they get born into families kind of randomly, like they're like a lot of the justification for nobility in societies is that they are a family chosen by God to rule, and that's why they are the monarch, is God picked them to be in charge. That's like the original justification for a lot of kings that are around. So the idea of the king's family having an Aasimar born into it occasionally would reinforce that and even give some validity to that claim of we are chosen people of the gods. You know, the angels themselves imbued us with our authority, and so the occasional birthing of an Aasimar in a noble family sounds pretty cool. And I could imagine them rebelling in some way, like every third generation an Aasimar is born into the noble family, and they are expected to they're like stripped of title and expected to serve in some sort of ceremonial position their whole life. And I could see somebody being like, screw that, and like leaving, and then ending up in nature and channeling some fury to do that. So they'd be an Aasimar with like a noble background for those nobility type skills, with a charisma bonus from Aasimar, with some healing to like bump people back up from 0, and a suite of other cool abilities. I think the fallen Aasimar also has some sort of like radius damage effect that they get every turn when they activate their their like death wings or whatever. So that could be pretty rad too, where I think they take the damage also, but they're resistant to it if I'm not mistaken. So having somebody who is that radius of effect damage person when they want to be is still a full-on barbarian, has just a minor investment into charisma, just enough to have like a +2 modifier with and then with the skill proficiency they can still sort of be the face of the party as they like know how to work angles on stuff.
Mm-hmm. So they have something similar to like the Stormhill Barbarians, where they do that AoE damage.
Yeah, I forget what it's. I might have the book. I have the book right here. So they have.
That's crazy. I didn't know that about them.
Yeah, I think it's one particular kind. There we go. The Fallen Aasimar Necrotic Shroud at 3rd level. You transform other creatures within 10 feet. You need to make a charisma saving throw, or become frightened of you. That's a frightened effect. Your transformation lasts for a minute. During it, once on each of your turns, you can deal extra necrotic damage to one target. Nope, that's not it. Maybe it's Scourge Aasimar. Yeah, Scourge Aasimar. Your transformation lasts for a minute. You shed bright light in a 10-foot radius and dim light another 10 feet. And the end of each of your turns, you and each creature within 10 feet of you take radiant damage equal to half your level, rounded up. In addition, you deal extra radiant damage on an attack. Yeah, so you get a minute of a 10-foot radius that's dealing some radiant damage every turn, as you can kind of weed into the middle of everything. And they also get a Constitution bonus as well as a Charisma bonus, so they're not completely nice. Non-min-maxed as far as Barbarian stuff goes. So being tough, being charismatic, sort of being that party leader who also can wade into the field of little enemies, kind of holding off the horde. That could be really cool and thematic, and having them also happening to be the rightful heir to the throne if it weren't for that kingdom's tradition of putting you in a ceremonial position. That could lead for a really cool story for a really rad character.
Oh, for sure.
Ooh,
Yeah, and the reach mechanic, God, that could go with anything. Like, I don't know, maybe your character's like a Sherpa who's used to leading people through the mountain, but
yeah,
he has that rage there because he also gets attacked occasionally and needs to fend stuff off.
right.
You know, kind of this like very survival thing. You know, you could be a fisherman who's out on a boat who has to like pull at these nets of fish, and they just get lost in the fury and the adrenaline is, you know, like
I love
pulling
the
at these massive fish nets.
I love the idea of the sailor background barbarian who there was like maybe an old wizard who was the captain of the ship, and that's how he learned catapult, and he would catapult harpoons into things. That's his one spell that he's learned.
There you go. That's
Tie it all
perfect.
in. You got this human sailor with catapult who's just like learned this trick, and it's since like learned how to focus his rage into a thing. Maybe his captain died in a big attack, and now you're on a search for revenge against the the dread pirate that destroyed him. Maybe it was Captain Black Sparrow to tie in our game this weekend.
Pirate Bobberts.
Dread pilot.
Bobberts with a B.
Yeah, Bobberts. Yes,
Bobberts.
Dread pirate Bobberts.
Not Dread Pirate Roberts. That's copyright.
No.
Like,
Dread pirate
Bobberts.
Bobberts. Pirate, of course, being a bi pirate. Oh man, the dead pirate Roberts. That's gonna stick with me for the next couple of days. But yeah, that's some cool stuff. Other like typical races you'll find are like Minotaur is kind of funny. It's been printed a few times. It's a strength and con bonus thing with like a gore attack and stuff. But also it's just kind of cool to be like a party of people and they like point at like what's with the Minotaur and be like, yeah, he's the muscle. Or you turn to him and be like, he's the smart one, and like he's the like because he could be depending on where he put his stats. Be like,
just shirtless, giant axe on his back. He's the wizard.
Yeah.
He's
the smart one. He's the sage background.
Bard, make a deception check.
Yeah. And then somebody's just like, it's a persuasion check. He actually is that. But yeah, so this full party of barbarians, I think it would work. I think the ultimate answer is yes. It's cool. It works. It's got a few shortcomings for area of effect and ranged and specific. But yeah, it's something to watch out for.
I like it. I could see it. Like maybe you're a group of dwarves, dwarven barbarians, and you have to travel back home.
Yeah.
And then just have like this long lost, like what was that game? The Lost Barbarians, the Lost Dwarves. Like this huge arc about trying to get back home.
I know.
It would be a fun game to play in.
Spoilers for Dragon Age 2 Origins or whatever. The one that was very...
It's been out forever.
Oh yeah, it's been out forever. So, no
Spoiler alert, King Kong dies.
Yeah. I always knew Bruce Willis was a ghost.
Sorry, spoiler alert.
You never know. So when you go with a dwarf background on that, you have an option of a common dwarf or a noble dwarf. And like common dwarf is like, oh, you're a street rat kind of dwarf type person. But their backstory, if you go with the noble dwarf, is like you are in the nobility and you get framed for murdering your dad or brother or something. Whoever, like, you were going to be in line for in charge of that house, but instead you got framed for that, and you have to like fight your way out, and you fight into the Underdark, and you eventually find your way to the magic good people that drink bad people blood or something. I forget the whole full context of that storyline. It's ripe for D&D building if you ever want an old game that's just a D&D game, like or campaign set up ready to go. But yeah, so that was one way that could go, where it's like you'd be an angry martial character. You'd have that nobility background if you wanted to be like sort of the face of the party. You'd be extra tough. depending on the dwarf you pick, because they can get like bonus hit points for each level. Yeah, it's a solid. Dwarf barbarians are a solid option. But we don't need to go through every race. We already talked about high elf getting a cantrip. That can be cool. Anything like mold earth can be interesting. It's just like a thing that people don't expect from a party of barbarians. They're like, they're all barbarians. I was like, all right, well, they're just barbarians. Be like, they made trenches for trench warfare. And be like, how? What? Oh, you're muted, Dylan.
I was laughing and said, one went invisible.
Yeah. One just disappeared. Like, we don't know what's going on. But yeah, it sounds like I got a very talkative baby in the background eating, so we'll go ahead and sign off here. But yeah, this has been a fun discussion. I look forward to more.
Oh, for sure.
I'm wondering if I should skip around or just go in order and do like Bard next.
Say Bard for me, since before Gargoth, it was like Bard 3 times in a row.
Yeah, it was like 3 Bards in a row before Gargoth.
But something else.
Right, yeah, I can skip around, it's fine.
Yeah, jump on Warlock, you're excited for it.
Yeah, Warlock is probably going to be my favorite. Yeah, that should be good.
Alrighty,
well, dude.
Go have fun with that baby, and I'll talk to you later.
Heck yeah! Alright, stay safe, everybody. Have a good time. Bye! Bye, Lane.
Bye!
Bye!